after this, so we want to make sure that we don't impinge on their time. So just to say thank you so much for joining us and for health presentation again. We want to inform you and educate you around your own health. So I truly hope that you will glean something from today's presentation. So before we start, I just want to ask everyone to stand while I pray. Thank you. Let us pray. Our gracious God and our Father, who art in heaven, Lord, once again we come before you, O Lord, to thank you for your many blessings that you've bestowed upon us. We thank you, O Lord, for what you've been doing for us, what you've done for us, and what you'll continue to do for us. Father, your vision for our lives is for us to have good health. Father, what we're trying to do, impart knowledge to your people. We're asking you, O Lord, that they'll be attentive. We ask, dear Father, that they will apply it to their lives and support their own family as well. We thank you, Almighty God, for everything, and may you take control of everything that is said and done today. This is our prayers in Jesus' name. Amen.
Happy Sabbath, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. I'm very excited to introduce Manveet Basra, the Associate Director of Public Health, Inclusion, and Awareness at Breast Cancer Now. Manveet leads the development and delivery of programs like these aimed at empowering patients and the public to manage their own risk of getting breast cancer, catching it early, and improving their quality of life after diagnosis and treatment. Her work is dedicated to ensuring every single one of us can play an active role in their health with the ultimate goal of reducing breast cancer recurrence. So please join me in welcoming Manveet.
Thank you, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, if anyone's really scared, could they just not, I'm not scary, I promise you, I'm not. If you can come forward, that would be great, because I feel like everybody's sat right at the back, so please do come forward. Thank you very much for inviting me here to speak today, and thank you very much for the introduction as well. The purpose of my talk is to give you up-to-date, accurate information. I am not here to scare you. If you have any questions at the end, I'm happy to answer those. I am going to take you through the signs and symptoms of breast cancer, what you can do to reduce your risk of breast cancer, tell you a little bit about what we do at the charity, but my talks are very much also about audience participation. So I always do ask questions and encourage you to just participate, because I don't want you to just hear me talking, because otherwise it'll be a bit boring. So a first question I wanted to ask you is, have any of you heard of the charity Breast Cancer Now? Okay, a few people, that's great. So for those of you that haven't, we are a UK-based charity. We have had 2 mergers over the last 8 years, and you might have heard of Breakthrough Breast Cancer Campaign, Breast Cancer Care. So in the last 8 years, we've just turned them into one charity. So that makes us the largest charity in the UK for people affected by breast cancer. Can anyone tell me how many people, as in women, in the UK you think are affected by breast cancer every year? $500, somebody said 500, okay. Any others? More than 500, okay.
Just raise your hand up and I'll bring the mic to you.
Okay, great. So we've had 500, we've had more than 500.
5,000.
Okay, 5,000. Any others? 3,000, okay. More than 5,000, okay.
1 million.
1 million, okay, great. Anyone else? Okay, it's 55,000 women in the UK are diagnosed with breast cancer every year. So it is the most common cancer in women. Can men get breast cancer? Oh, great. How many men do you think can get breast cancer? Okay, somebody said
2000.
2000. Okay, any others on 2000? So it's 400 men a year get diagnosed with breast cancer. So it's very, very rare in men. Men are more likely to get prostate cancer. But it is still particularly a significant amount of women in the UK every single year. We don't know enough about breast cancer in men. So as a charity, what we do is we fund the most amount of research in breast cancer across the UK. So we have done studies to better understand why men get diagnosed. Now, I guess to answer in addition to that question asked is, some people don't think of men as having breasts, but they also have breast tissue. So what we know about breast cancer in men is that it is more common in men that are 60 and above. If you are overweight or obese, it's more common. But with men, what we always say is to be body aware. So they can come up with the same signs and symptoms, which I'll talk you through a little bit later on. So 1 in 7 people in the UK will be diagnosed with breast cancer every year. Now, anybody know what the survival rates of breast cancer are in the UK? So if somebody was diagnosed at stage 1, so there's 4 stages of breast cancer, what do you think the survival rates are if somebody's diagnosed at the earliest stage? Quite high. Okay, great. Quite high. 55%? Okay, somebody said 55%.
Listen, I'll give the instruction once again. Once again, raise your hand up and I'll come so others can hear what you're saying.
I'm going to say 90% survival rate.
Okay, so it's actually it's 99% at the earliest stage. So if diagnosed early, at stage 1 of the 4 stages of breast cancer, it's 99%. And the only reason for that is over the last 40 years, there's been significant advances in research, in awareness, and in people coming forward when they notice something new or unusual. Now, when we get to stage 2, that's dropped slightly. So it drops to 90%. When we get to stage 3, it drops even more. And unfortunately, when we get to stage 4, that's where it becomes untreatable. So if there's one thing you take away from this talk today, is that if you notice anything new or unusual, it's really, really important that you get it checked out by a doctor. And I'll tell you why. The latest statistics in England show that 25% of Black African, 23% of Black Caribbean women are diagnosed at stages 3 and 4 of breast cancer compared to white women. So as you can see, I'm from the Asian community, and in the community I'm from, we don't talk about cancer, let alone breast cancer. We don't talk about our breasts. It's not something we talk about. So that's why it's really, really important, like people like Tracy that have kind of put on this event today, because they really do care about how we part that information out into the wider community and what could we be doing about it so that we have more people, if they are diagnosed, that they are coming forward in the earliest stage. Do you know what the signs and symptoms of breast cancer are?
You can have unusual lumps.
Lumps, yep.
Sometimes you have itching in certain areas. Or sometimes the nipples will leak.
So there's somebody who's just notified like 3 of the signs and symptoms, which is great, because it's really, really important that you know what the exact signs and symptoms are. Now, with any changes in your breasts, it's really important that just because you notice something of the symptoms I'm going to mention, it does not mean that it is breast cancer. There's so many other conditions related to the breast, and it could be a sign of an infection that is totally treatable. So one of the ones that came up first was lumps. Now, most lumps are non-cancerous, so they are benign. The other one that Lady mentioned was also nipple discharge. So if you get a nipple discharge from either one or both of the nipples, that is also something to look out for. And it could be colourless or blood-stained. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And the other one was itchiness. So if you get a persistent itch around the nipples that just doesn't go away, that's another thing to be aware of. Any others?
I was going to say blood. Blood
Okay.
from the nipple.
Yep.
I think the lumps can start from under the arm.
Yep. So when we talk about, one of the things we talk about is breast awareness. So when we talk about breast awareness, we mean what to look out for. So do we know what the signs and symptoms are? Where we need to be breast aware, as in what areas we need to check for. And if we notice one of those symptoms, what to do if we notice something unusual as well. So the lady just said to check underneath the armpits, which is a really, really important point, because what a lot of women say to us, I check my breast area, I don't need to check anywhere else. But there's breast tissue in your armpits as well.
Yeah.
So that's a really, really key important point. Yep.
Tenderness or sudden change in size.
Perfect. So I think I'm ready to go home because you all know the signs and symptoms, and it's really, really great. So any changes, sudden changes to the shape or the size of your breast. Now, most people in this room, we will all have different sizes and shapes of the breast, which is perfectly normal. What you're looking out for if you get one breast that suddenly sits larger or lower than the other, that's one of the things that you need to also look out for. So that's a really, really key one. Any others that you can think of in terms of signs and symptoms? Rashes, yep. So again, any rashes that don't go away.
And you can find like milk, breast milk, like when you're feeding a baby, it's coming out of your breast. Because that's what my two breasts, I found out those cancer lumps before, and it was milky. And I said, this cannot be real. But praise God, it wasn't cancerous. They thought it was, though, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a woman's lifetime, their breasts will change at 4 points in their lifetime. At puberty, so when they're a teenager, if they are then breastfeeding, and also as they become an older woman, particularly around the menopause again. And then that can cause changes to the size and the shape and the texture of the breasts as well. And earlier on, somebody did say about breast tenderness as well. So one of the key things to remember with breast tenderness is for women who are still having periods, you might remember and be aware of the fact that about a week or 2 weeks before your period's due, your breasts get quite sore and tender, which is perfectly normal. What you're looking out for is that if that tenderness just does not go away, so if it's there all of the time. Any others that you can think of?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, supposing the breast, you said one of the breasts that's getting large and then become very firm and hard. What does that mean?
That could mean a variety of things. So the doctor would need to kind of, first of all, one of the things I would say is you know your body better than anybody else. That's why it's so important to be breast and body aware. So you'll know if there's slight changes that are not your usual normal. So what we would say to women particularly is you can either note these down, either in a diary, just keep an eye. So if you're having your periods, always check your breasts outside of your period. When it comes to your menopause, which is usually around the age of about 53, the breasts change again. So it's important that when those changes happen, that you specifically are looking out for anything that might be slightly different. And once you've been to the GP, they will decide whether they need to refer you on or whether you need to just keep an eye on it, because it could just be the sign of an infection or something that's treatable.
Pain.
Pain. Okay, so pain on its own, if somebody's experiencing pain in their breasts, that's not usually a sign of breast cancer. So if you've got persistent pain that will not go away, that is a cause for concern. But if you've got pain that just comes and goes, that's not a sign for breast cancer. So for women that are still having periods, they will get cyclical pain, which is associated with their cycles. So sometimes that pain is actually coming from another part of the body, but it will show up in the breast. Then you also have non-cyclical pain, which is outside of a woman's period and sort of menstrual cycles as well. So the key thing is, it's there all or most of the time. That's what you've got to be aware of.
Hi, I know you mentioned rash, but it also could be a pimple that doesn't heal, like a spot.
If it's a spot, again, something, it could be treated by a prescription medication. What you've got to look out for, is it getting any larger? Is it persistently itching? Other things to bear in mind is if it comes on all of a sudden and you're keeping an eye on it, have you changed your detergent? Are you using a different moisturizer? Have you used a different fragrance that could aggravate that area of your body? So look out for all of those things as well.
What's the difference between mastitis and cancer?
So mastitis usually happens when a woman is breastfeeding as well. It can cause clogging of the breast area as well. And then with cancer, it's quite different in that cancer is when our cells, so we've all got millions and millions of different cells, and they repeat in terms of when they grow and divide. And if it causes a problem when the cells duplicate and they start to grow in an abnormal way, that's known as cancer. Yeah. Now, cancer is the collective term that we use, but there's two types. So there's benign, which is non-cancerous, then there's malignant,
yes,
which is where it's spread.
Yes, and how does a husband feature with breast cancer per se?
So how does a husband, sorry, if you can repeat the second.
Yeah, because what it is, I've heard that most breast cancers is normally the husband that observes something different. Yes?
That is very true. I mean, last week we were delivering a session and one of the women had actually said that it was her husband that actually picked up that she had a change in her breast, and she did go on to have breast cancer. So that's another way of checking whether there's any kind of abnormality. So as a husband or a partner, it's important that if you notice something that doesn't feel quite right, to tell your partner or your wife to say, I'm not too sure about that. Maybe you should book an appointment and get that checked out. And it could be nothing, but that's another way for a partner or a wife or a husband to be able to support in that way. But that's a really, really good point as well, because that's where, with women, what we find is when we ask women, we're like, what is the number one reason why you don't check your breasts? And they will always say, because we forget. And the reason being that they're juggling so many different things. If they've got children, if they've got grandchildren, if they've got other caring responsibilities, if they're juggling work and responsibilities in the home, the women tend to be the ones that then drop down the list of priorities, and it's then they're last on the list and they're thinking about everybody else. So that's why it's really, really important. And a lot of people say to us, but I don't know how to check. There's no right or wrong way to check your breasts. And if you have a look on the screen above, that will show you the area that's highlighted that you need to check. So you need to check all the way up to your collarbone, which is known as your clavicle. It is the hard bit just on this bit here, the clavicle just under the neck. All the way up there and right into the armpit as well, because all of that area contains breast tissue. So like I said earlier on, people just say, well, I've just checked these bits and it's fine. All of that area contains breast tissue. Now you can do it standing up, you can do it lying down, you can do it in the bath, when you're sitting in the bath, in front of the mirror. It's very much around touching and feeling. So at Breast Cancer Now, we use a message called TLC, which is touch, look, check. So some people find it's easier to use the pads of their fingers. Some people find it's easier just to be able to use two. And the most important thing is you are pressing firmly enough all around that area and right into the armpit. And initially, if you do it, it might take you longer because you want to cover all parts of that breast tissue area. After a while, when you become more familiar about doing it, it might not take you as long. It might just take you a few minutes. So we sometimes find that actually if you're applying body moisturizer, it's a good time. You stood in front of the mirror, you're putting body moisturizer on your body anyway, so it's another good opportunity to be able to check. So why is it important for people within the black community? Most women, even though the incidence, so the number of women that are affected by breast cancer, whilst it's lower in the black community, I mentioned statistics at the beginning, they are picked up a lot later because they are presenting a lot later. Why? Because they don't know what the signs are, they do not trust the healthcare system and whether they will be taken seriously, and they also do not want to talk about cancer, let alone breast cancer. So just very much like the South Asian culture, if you go to a funeral, you will very seldom actually realize what that person actually died from. And if it's cancer, it's not something that's talked about. So it's charities like ours and smaller charities as well that are coming together and making sure that all of the communities get the right information and they have the right information to be able to do something about it. So what we know for black women is that when they are diagnosed at a younger age. Now, can anyone tell me when breast cancer is most common? The majority of women, at what approximate age do they get diagnosed with breast cancer?
Sorry, I'm not going to answer your question because I don't know the answer to it, but I've got a question. I have been having trouble with my breast nipples for years. They have been paining non-stop. And at times, I don't like to wear a bra. So when I'm at home, I will take it off. And sometimes it feels like I'm a newly mom feeding a baby. They will be so full and so painful. I've been to the doctor about it. They can't tell me what's wrong. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where to go next. Do you have any idea why my nipples will be paining like this, which has been going on for years? I'm talking like 4 or 5 years.
I mean, I wouldn't be able to explain why you're getting that persistent pain, but if you've already been to the doctor and did they actually check you out as well? And they couldn't explain?
They did, but there's no answer. There has to be something because my breast nipple can't just be paining for the sake of just paining. There must be something going on. But what it is, no one can tell me.
Are you, at your practice, are there multiple GPs? Are there lots of different GPs?
Yes.
Yeah. Could you, I mean, if you've seen the same one again, could you potentially then go back and ask to see somebody else?
I've actually went to King's at the breast clinic, mm-hmm. and I've seen the doctor there, and then they themselves can't tell me what the problem is.
Okay. So sometimes, I mean, you're talking about breast pain, but some women can also have fatty lumps that are non-cancerous, which are called fibroadenomas. And they are quite common, and sometimes women get them quite frequently. You can get quite lumpy breasts if you're breastfeeding, which can sometimes be a cause for concern, especially for a nursing mother where they're suddenly thinking, why do my breasts feel so lumpy? And it's part of the changes of kind of the pregnancy as well. But I would continue to just keep an eye on it, and if it still persists, if you don't mind me asking, in terms of, have you been to your mammogram appointments yet? Are you ready to go yet in terms of your mammograms?
Sorry, repeat that.
So have you been invited for a mammogram yet? A breast screening exam?
I did one.
And you've been, and nothing on there?
Nothing, but the pain is still there. And
okay.
When it pains, it's really painful.
Okay.
I mean, my youngest is 15, I'm not breastfeeding, but my breasts at times to be like, it's so full of milk and really paining.
Yeah. Okay, the fact that you've had a screening appointment as well as being to the doctor, I think unfortunately it's going to be one of those things where you're going to have to just continue to keep an eye on it. It could also be, sometimes the pain could also be coming from the back, especially if, with some women, if your breasts are larger, sometimes they can cause persistent back pain as well.
It's the nipples.
And it's just the front, yeah.
It's the nipples.
Is it just the nipples?
Yeah, it's just the nipples.
I mean, if the doctors have checked it out and it still persists, I would still keep vigilant, and if it still continues, but if there's nothing that showed up on the scan that's a good thing that you're going to your breast screening appointment. But if there's something that hasn't showed up on the scan, it's important just to kind of keep vigilant in between as well, just in case there's other changes to look out for as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Can I quickly say, can stress bring something like this on? Because stress in this country is a killer.
In part of the presentation, I also talk about what are the myths and misconceptions around breast cancer. So stress has just come up. So there's no evidence, there is no conclusive evidence that shows that stress causes breast cancer. There's no evidence.
Sorry, what is the relationship? I heard a program saying that if you've got a male family member that has prostate cancer, females in that family should get themselves checked out for breast cancer.
Okay, it's great that you've jumped ahead. So I will answer your question in a moment, because now I'm going to ask a question about family history. Okay. So who do you think is most at risk of getting breast cancer?
The age, I feel, is about 40.
40, okay. And one person said 40. Anybody else? What's the age at which you think the most most people get diagnosed with breast cancer, as in most women? So somebody's just said 40. Somebody said 30 to 40. After 30, okay.
Is it after they have the menopause?
I think if I had a prize, you would get the prize. So yeah, it's 50 plus. So 80% of breast cancers that are diagnosed so that's 4 in 5, are in women 50 and above. But if you remember, just a few moments ago, I also said that black women are more likely to get diagnosed under the age of 50 and under 40. So the key thing here is menopause plays a factor, because your body changes again. And it's to do with the hormone levels, the estrogen levels as well. So, for example, we know that if your period started a lot later, that has an impact. If they started a lot earlier, the number of children you have, if you breastfeed or if you don't breastfeed, that also has an impact. And the other question that the lady asked at the back was around family history. So what do you think is the percentage of people that get diagnosed in terms of family history? What do you think the percentage is of people getting breast cancer and having a family history?
Don't know. Anybody know? Family history?
Okay. So somebody at the front has just said it's low. Okay.
No, that's high. About 60%.
Somebody said 60%, and in the front I've heard it's quite low.
I would say 40%.
Okay, 40%, 60%. Perfect.
Sorry,
so the number, family history, sorry, go ahead.
Is the question if someone in the family already has breast cancer? Is that the question?
It's in terms of family history, so what's the percentage, how many breast cancer account for family history, so related to family history?
How many
people,
yeah.
So if you were to say as a percentage, how many people do you think would, in the UK, how much in terms of breast cancer do people get diagnosed in the context of family history, that they have a family
I'd say
link?
high, maybe 70%.
70%. So I've had 70, 60, 40, and very low. So it's actually 5 to 10%. Family history is very, very low. People think it's a lot higher. And I'm just going to go back to the point that the lady at the back made around testing and if somebody has had prostate cancer. Now, when a doctor looks at genetics and if you have cancer in your family, so let's take, for example, breast cancer. If you've had an aunt, a mother, a grandmother diagnosed all under the age of 40, and a person's been diagnosed themselves, genetic history a doctor will look at your genetic history on one side of the family first. So if it's on your mum's side, they will look at who in your family has been diagnosed under the age of 40. Is it an aunt? Is it a grandmother? Is it a sister? They will do exactly the same thing on the dad's side. They will also look at if there's any connection or if there is anyone in the family, as in any men, uncles, etc., that have had prostate cancer. So if you were here a few weeks ago, I know one of my colleagues that I'd worked with previously, Suresh, came to give a talk about prostate cancer. So we also know that is very, very common, more common than it is in white men amongst black men. So what they will also do is take all of that family history into account. Now, what makes that really complicated is when you don't know your family history. It makes it complicated if you do not talk about cancer, if you're adopted, if your parents, uncles, aunts have already died and you do not know your family history. That's why it's really, really important to have these conversations. And I want to bring your attention back to that first figure I said at the start, was the 99% at stage 1. There's a question there.
Do you want to say something? I understand that breast cancer should come by deodorant and cause through things that we use in our body, deodorant and what you eat.
Okay, so the question that the lady said was around deodorants and deodorants causing breast cancer. So that's a myth. It's not true. It is not true. Deodorants do not cause breast cancer. It's a myth that keeps coming up in the media since the 1980s. There's no evidence to connect deodorants and breast cancer. Now, what antiperspirants, so deodorants help to kind of deodorize the armpit area, and then antiperspirants help to block the pores that cause the sweat in the first place. So what normally would happen is, at a breast screening appointment, and I'll talk about this in a moment, is you are asked on the day not to wear any antiperspirants or deodorants. And the reason for that is it can give an unclear reading. Now, for those of you that have already had mammograms, it can be quite a nerve-wracking process. You go, it's painful, and then you're waiting for results for 2 to 3 weeks afterwards. Now, if you've been and it gives you an unclear reading, and then you might have to be called back, that can also be really nerve-wracking. So that's one of the key things. So you'd always be asked not to wear that on the day of your appointment. And so there's no link whatsoever between deodorants and antiperspirants. Now, aluminium chloride is a product and a chemical that's in antiperspirants. And it's quite a common ingredient in those antiperspirants, but it does not cause breast cancer. So if you've read anything or heard anything, it's not true. Yes. Yeah. So the lady at the front had just said that if that was the case in terms of deodorant and breast cancer, and if that were true, then you'll probably see more men presenting with breast cancer as well.
Yes. Does lifestyle play a part in breast cancer?
Okay, great. So I love this because this is all in the presentation.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll go to lifestyle first and then I'll come back to the screening program. So lifestyle and breast cancer risks. So what we know is that up to 23% of breast cancers can be prevented through modifiable, so things that you can change in terms of your lifestyle. Now, that isn't a guarantee because there are people who eat well, people who exercise and are physically active, and they still go on to develop breast cancer. Can anyone tell me how many minutes of physical activity a week in the UK the Chief Medical Officer advises that we should be doing a week? Okay, somebody said 20 minutes 3 times a week, so that's an hour. Any others?
Is it 150 hours?
150 minutes.
Minutes.
150 minutes, yes. It's 150 minutes a week that we should be doing. So if you imagine, what you should be aiming for is, if you're walking and you're able to still talk, so it raises your heart rate a little bit, but you can still relatively have a conversation. That's what you're aiming for in terms of your moderate activity that you should be doing. That could be broken up however you want. You do not have to join a fancy gym. You do not have to get an expensive bike. You do not have to get expensive equipment to be able to do that. You can do that through walking. If you take the bus, you can get off the bus a stop earlier. If there's a lift, you could get off one lift if you're able to earlier and walk up a flight of stairs. You know, it's all about incorporating a lot of those activities into your daily lifestyle. And you can chunk it up as much as you want. So it could be 20 minutes, 20 minutes a day, spread out across the week. It does not have to be 150 minutes. It could be one of my friends, she has a trampoline and she loves watching television. So she has a mini trampoline in her living room and she watches TV and she uses the trampoline. So it's just about being creative about what it is that you could be doing. If you've got children, grandchildren, it's just like if you have dogs, etc. It's another way to kind of be active and be in the outdoors as well. What about drinking? Do you think drinking has a part to play in breast cancer?
What do you mean drinking? Water?
Okay, great. So do you know what the percentage might be in terms of if somebody drinks alcohol, because now we've done research and now we know exactly the percentage risk factor that alcohol plays. So any idea in terms of the percentage of alcohol, how much it contributes to breast cancer?
Don't know. We don't drink, so we don't know.
We
don't drink, so we don't
40.
know.
40? Okay, somebody said 40. Any others? 60? Okay, 16? Okay, it's actually 8%. So we know that 8% of breast cancers are caused by regularly drinking alcohol. So does anybody know how many units of alcohol we shouldn't be going over in a week in the UK? How many units? 14, yes, 14. It's 14 units. 14 units. So that's spread out across the week. Now, for people who don't drink, that doesn't mean they will not necessarily get breast cancer, because there still is a risk. Because our risk is very complex when we talk about breast cancer, because one of the things we would have to do, so for example, lifestyle, or if we look at what we're eating, we would have to, for example, eat exactly the same thing every single day from the day we are born all the way up to old age to be able to define whether it's X in our diet or Y in our diet that has caused that breast cancer. So at Breast Cancer Now, we have been running a study which started in 2009, and 130,000 people participate in this study. So these are people with breast cancer, these are people who don't have breast cancer, and periodically they complete questionnaires, they do blood tests, and they answer questions specifically about lifestyle. But what you will hear in the newspaper, on social media, through the church, and other accesses where you go and access information is, it's really, really important to have a balance of different things and everything in moderation. So you will always hear, ensure that you eat a lot of fruit and vegetables. Now in the UK, the target used to be that we used to have to eat at least 5 portions of fruit and vegetables in our diet to kind of sustain a healthy lifestyle. And they've increased that now to say that we should be eating at least 7 to 10 portions, because as a nation, we are not even meeting those kind of criteria for the amount of vegetables and fruit that we eat. So that's really, really important. If we fry foods, it's thinking about, nobody's saying don't have them, it's very much around how often you have them. So if you're eating meat, it's about ensuring that you cut the fat off the meat and how you cook the meat. So it's not about being without those things, because otherwise what's the point? It's very much around having a balance of all of those things. Yes?
Is there a link between social economic status and the risk of developing breast cancer? Because I'll figure out, if you're saying that you have to have a lot more fruit and veg in your diet, etc., those things, especially organic ones, come with a lot of a price tag on there, for example, and I don't envision people from the lower socio-economics will be able to afford those. So is there a link between maybe poorer people or working class having a higher risk of breast cancer?
Socioeconomic status, so where you live, your level of education, your access to healthcare, all of those things do play a part. So you'll notice that as communities like us, we will tend to congregate and come together in places where there are other people like us. They are not always the most highly affluent areas. They will be in areas of deprivation. It also depends on access to services and whether we've got enough people to be able to, have you got an appointment to go and see the GP? All of those things do have a major part to play. And also, as I mentioned at the start, we know that within certain communities, we have lower levels of breast awareness. So for example, the other thing I wanted to mention here is, because I said I'd mention it before, is the NHS breast screening program. So when a woman turns 50, and not on her 50th birthday always, by the time she's 53, she will be invited to go for a mammogram, which is an X-ray of the breast. So they take 2 X-rays on each side, so it's 4 X-rays on each side, where they put them in between 2 metal plates to be able to check all of the breast tissue. Now we know that black women, and also Asian women, we have the lowest rates of breast attendance at mammograms. So in London, the target should be 70%, and it's gone down to 53%. And year on year, the targets are failing. So you might notice in the supermarket, there'll be mobile units, there'll be also centres within hospitals. So what the NHS and other kind of charities are trying to do is get those units in places where people can get to them. Things like cost of, travel, not being close to a hospital, parking costs, all of those things have a part to play. And then also, what we also find is that women don't want to ask their manager or their employer or to tell them that they need to take time off for medical appointments. And it's the same with cervical smears, if they're having cervical smears. If your boss is a man, you don't really want to tell them that that's what you're going to an appointment for. And that's why it's really, really important that you attend when you're invited. If you can't make the appointment, you can change it. What we find is that women, if the letter comes through or they get a text, they ignore it and they think they cannot change it. Because the most important thing with breast screening is it will pick up anything that cannot be seen or felt by your hands or witnessed, what you can look at through a mirror and by the naked eye. It will pick that up through a mammogram as well. So one of the other things that we find, particularly within the South Asian community, is that women don't want to go because they don't know whether a man will be doing the mammogram. The NHS only has women mammographers doing breast screening exams. So it will always be a woman. You can take somebody along with you if you're nervous. They won't be able to go inside the room because it has radiation, so they'll have to be outside, but you can take someone along if you are nervous about going along and it's your first time. We also find that if women within your friendship circle, your family, if they tell you that it's uncomfortable, it's really painful, it's really horrible, I had a bad experience, the women don't go. But I want to bring your attention back to that first statistic and what that means for women in the black community. And it's just like the earlier it's diagnosed, the more successful the treatment is going to be. And that's really, really important. So I've talked about alcohol. Some of the myths have already been addressed, but I've just put up on the screen a few other myths. So any of these that you particularly think, which of these increase breast cancer or not? We've spoken about deodorant. We've also spoken about stress. And there's a few others in there as well. Underwired bras, that's another one. Has anyone heard anything about the connection between underwired bras and whether it causes an increase in breast cancer? It's nonsense. It's not true. 3 out of 5 women wear the wrong bra. Underwired bras, not all women can wear them, want to wear them, and that's perfectly fine. A lot of the time, because you wear an uncomfortable bra, it can cause pain and discomfort in your breasts and also in your back. But there is no evidence to suggest that wearing an underwired bra causes breast cancer. Just like all of the other things on that page, there's no evidence that any of these things cause breast cancer. If you have breastfed, and not everybody can, there's 2 comprehensive studies that were done that showed that if you breastfeed your baby for 6 months or more, and the NHS normally advises that 6 months is all you need to do, that can reduce your risk, that can help to reduce your risk by 2% per child that you have breastfed. And I totally appreciate that not every woman can breastfeed, so they have to bottle feed. But there's a positive effect of breastfeeding. Yeah.
You know when you said there's no evidence that exists that any of those can increase the risk of breast cancer, is it that the fact that the research hasn't been done, or the fact is it's been done by a number of researchers over years and they haven't found no evidence?
So with the mobile phones, they are still relatively quite new, as are all of the kind of digital aids that we use. With that, for now, we would have to do more intensive research to show that there's a link. I mean, there's other challenges with using digital technology that can have an impact more widely, but yeah, it would be for that, in that situation, there would have to be more comprehensive evidence. There's not enough evidence, but as of this point in time, none of those things on there are true. Whether that changes in 10, 15, 20 years, none of us can say, but there would have to be more intensive research around that.
So the question I wanted to ask, the question I want to ask is this one about mammogram. After you reach certain age, they don't allow you to have a mammogram anymore. So, my question is, what is next if you're not allowed? Can you do it privately? Is there another way?
Okay, so really, really good question. So when you turn 50, every 3 years you will get an invitation to have your breast screening appointment. Now, if you have a sign or symptom before that age, your doctor will refer you, but it won't be part of the 3-year program. You might then get a mammogram separately to investigate something further. When you get to the age of 71, when you go for your last mammogram, they will also tell you, this is your last one, but you will not get an automatic invitation. Now, I mentioned earlier that breast cancer increases as you get older. So after the age of 71, you can you book your own appointment. So if you've been to a certain unit, you can phone them, turn up and just say, I had my last mammogram, I'm 74 years old, I'm now due to have my next one. They will do a screening for you. It won't go through your doctor.
This is going to be your last one, or they're saying that by your next birthday, it'll be too late. You would have missed it. So I'm wondering what happens in between. For me, it's not a hot issue, so I haven't bothered to investigate it. But as you were talking, I want to know if you want to give me for an example, they've written to me and they said, by your next birthday, you won't be able to have another one. So I'm wondering what happens next.
Yes, so when they will always tell you just before your last one that they will not automatically invite you. So you just make your own appointment after that. So once you've had that last one, you just need to remember to make that appointment directly with that mobile unit or that hospital unit.
So I need to hear what she said.
So so you can make after your last appointment, your next one, you will not get a letter or a text message, however they communicate with you. You can directly make the appointment yourself for 3 years, in the 3-year next time period. Okay. And that's really, really important, because a lot of women, if they're not checking their breasts, if they're not going to their mammograms, how do they know that there's any differences? Or signs and symptoms and changes. So for example, breast screening, so the mammograms, they detect 1,300 breast cancers a year. And if you remember I said earlier on is that it's really, really important that when you're breast checking, and if you then get to breast screening age, it's also important that we have a lot of women saying, well, I've had my mammogram, I'm okay. 3 years is a long time to wait to not be checking your breasts in between. So it's really, really important to do that regularly. And that could be every 4 to 6 weeks that you check yourself in between at home. It would be great, I mean, Tracy's been handing out some evaluation forms. My team, me, and the volunteers that go out cannot do this unless we have feedback from yourselves. And in order to keep these programs going and to inform communities like yourself, it's really important that we get the feedback to say, A, that those, you found, whether you found it useful or not, whether you learned anything new, or whether you suggest any changes. So if you can fill that in, and if you don't want to fill it in on paper, we have a QR code. So if you have a mobile phone and you want to do it through the QR code, I'm going to leave that up on there for a few minutes so that you can click on that, and that information is completely anonymous. We don't store any of your personal data because you don't have to give your name or anything, but it just means that my team get the data to be able to go back and say that the stuff that we're doing is actually helping people and educating people as well.
Can I just ask a question? You said that once they find out about the family history, does that mean at a certain age, because you've got young ladies getting breast cancer now at an earlier age, so in that case, what happens if they've got a history of breast cancer within the family and they have problems with the breast? Is there a process that they go through?
So if somebody in your family was diagnosed, say for example it was a mother and she's got daughters and she was diagnosed under the age of 40, what would happen is that they would, if the daughters are adults, they would ask them whether they would want to have genetic testing to see if they carry the BRCA gene. Now the BRCA gene, if you remember in the papers, Angelina Jolie, she had surgery, preventative surgery, where she had a mastectomy, double mastectomy to remove her breasts because she had a family history. That's not an option for everybody, that's individual to everybody. But what they would do is they would advise whether your sisters, your daughters, that you carry a family history. And what would then happen is the minute they turn 40, for example, they would automatically have breast screening appointments. So it would be under the age that the NHS do it for every woman, so everybody that's registered as female. What they would also look at again is there a history of prostate cancer in the family as well? That's why what I would encourage you to do is know the kind of health conditions that happen in your family, who has been diagnosed, and how much you can capture, because that helps when you are having genetic testing. And that, when I say that, that doesn't mean, say if you had an uncle that got diagnosed with lung cancer, somebody got diagnosed with bowel cancer, that does not mean you have a family history. I'm specifically talking about breast, if there's a history of breast cancer and or prostate cancer.
Yes, in recent times, I've observed that more men are impacted with breast cancer, because they're talking about man boobs, yes? And I see that more men are getting breast cancer.
It's still very, very rare. So 55,000 women, 400 men. It's still very, very rare. A man is still more likely to get prostate cancer than they are going to get breast cancer. So you might be hearing about it more in the media, because what people want to do is raise awareness that men get breast cancer too. It's not necessarily that there's more cases of breast cancer in men. It's still very, very rare. Yeah.
Good afternoon to all. I would like to ask this question, please.
I'm just
when
looking.
I was younger, and having my mammogram, it was so painful as if the whole thing going to come off. Now I get older, I'm sure young people have the same problems. I get older, and when they put that thing on you, it's like the whole thing coming out. Now, I did have that before, but now I haven't got, I only have a little bit. And they're still pressing down like that to the skin. Why they have to press down so hard?
Because when they put the metal plates, when they put the breast in between the two metal plates, they have to press quite hard because they need to get a full picture of all of that area with breast tissue. That's why they have to put them in those plates. And for women, for example, one of the things we also hear is from women that have smaller breasts, they're like, oh, well, I won't get breast cancer because I've got smaller breasts. That does not matter. You still have breast tissue.
Yes, I had bigger one then. It's only since I get older and it's gone small. So I'm just saying, knowledge increase. Surely they should find something else to do to save women from going through all that pain.
So I would ask you, and this is what, if my colleague was here from prostate cancer, if you ask a man if they had to have a digital rectal examination for prostate cancer, would they rather do that, or would you have your breasts in a mammogram?
Well, the thing is, they can do different things. They don't have to do it so hard for you.
But the thing is, if they didn't press down, they would not get a full picture of that breast, and you will not get, when they look up on the X-ray, they will not be able to see the whole picture.
I get what she's saying, because prostate cancer, for what I'm aware of, it's no longer you have to do the rectum thing anymore. You can do it through blood tests, apparently, for men.
That's a PSA test. So you still, a doctor would still have to, first of all, do a digital rectal examination.
So they still have to do that?
They do encourage, particularly with the risk being so high in black men, they encourage them to go and get the PSA test done, fully well knowing that actually if they can go at the age of 40. They are trying different techniques, but they've also got to look at what is the one that's going to give them the best results. It's the best one we have so far. Scientists are working on other techniques, and at the moment it's the best that we have. It's at the moment the scientists and researchers. It takes a lot of time as well to develop new techniques. Hopefully in the future there might be better options. At the same time, when our breast cancer colleagues, as well as volunteers who volunteer for us, understandably, they've also said that if I didn't go to my mammogram, I would not have known I had breast cancer. So when they go out in the public, they will always encourage people to go to their breast screening appointments. But research is evolving all the time, and probably at a faster rate than it was 40 odd years ago. The techniques were quite grueling, and also were the treatments as well.
Is there an age limit when you get older where you don't need to have breast screening anymore? You've passed the age where you'll get breast cancer. Is there any age limit?
So it increases as you get older. So the screening program is 50 to 71, that you'll get automatically invited. And the lady asked earlier on, so after 71, you would still have to go. And because 80%, so 4 in 5 breast cancers occur in women that are 50 and above, and it increases with age, I would still encourage everybody to still continue to go every 3 years past the age of 71. You just make your appointment directly yourself. You don't need to go through your GP. The most important thing you need to remember, if you move addresses, you need to update that on your GP list, because if they don't have the right address, your appointment letter could be going somewhere else. So that's the most important thing, that your data is all registered and it's all up to date. So if you do move, just make sure that they do know that as well. And if you don't want to go to a hospital, the staff on those mobile screening units are as professional. You will not get a less of a service. if you do not attend one in a hospital. So those ones in supermarkets are designed to make it more accessible. And what we've done as a charity, we have produced a lot of videos specifically for both black women as well as South Asian women as well, to explain what the process is. Because a lot of people think, well, I'm not experiencing pain, I don't need for it to go for a mammogram, but that's not true. So it's very much, and we also talk about the experiences of women from those communities who are still living 10, 15, 20 years on from their diagnosis, who then are our ambassadors, and they come out and speak on our films and on interviews to talk about this as well, because it's such an important issue. I mean, you know, there was a prayer at the start about your health. Colleagues here are really encouraging people from the community to really play an active role in terms of what we can do with our health as well. So I hope that what you've heard today has given you some new, up-to-date information. Thank you so much for your questions. I really do appreciate it. If you've completed the event, there's one more. Okay, there's two more.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for the presentation. It's been very informative and encouraging. From your research, you've done a lot of research. So what would you say is like the main reason why we get breast cancer? That's question. The second part of that question, could it be things like breast implants? So what is the main reason? And does breast implant have anything to do with people getting that?
We don't know what the single cause is, because there's over 20 different types of breast cancer. So with research over the last 40 plus years, we're finding out as much as we can, and we know what it isn't at the moment. And your second part of the question is around breast implants. Now, if somebody's chosen to have breast implants, if they are attending a breast screening appointment, you need to let the team know before your appointment, because they will need to factor in that, you know, it's gone quite wrong, particularly with an implant. But there's no evidence to suggest that it's actually an implant that is the cause for the breast cancer. There's so many different factors, which is why, as a charity, we're working on the generation study as well. We don't know. But one of the things we do know, and we've been doing quite a lot of work with healthcare professionals, is we recognize within communities, God, faith, spirituality has a significant part to play. So what we are doing is working with healthcare professionals, and particularly healthcare professionals from our own communities, to better educate other healthcare professionals. So, for example, when someone's training to be a doctor, part of their training also includes that it's not just white people that get breast cancer, but it's also other communities too, and some of the other things that they need to factor in when they're making those treatment decisions. So a lot of people will find that if they've had a diagnosis, and people come to us all the time, they will say, I will pray and I will be okay, and they won't take their medication. Now, healthcare professionals from the black community encourage you can still pray, you can still believe in God, but it's also important to continue with any treatment that you've also been. And that's where we need to continue to build cultural competency amongst healthcare professionals, so they better understand when they're making those decisions that, okay, the person in front of me isn't the same as everybody else. They are a black woman, or they might be an older black woman, and you know, they might have a family history, and these are the things that you also need to be aware of, that they need to take into account when they make those treatment decisions as well. And I know you had a question. I'm happy to take it separately, so you can come up and speak to me. Thank you so much for your time, your attention. I wish you all the very best today and for the rest of the weekend. And if you've got any questions, remember Breast Cancer Now. We're here. We've got a free information helpline that is available Monday to Saturday. We've got an Ask Our Nurse service. We do awareness events in the community as well. We do a lot of research, particularly for different communities as well. So we're really open to kind of really coming out and educating you with the right information. Thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manveet, for coming. And I'm sure I've learned something, and I know there's something that I need to follow up on. So thank you very much for reminding and refreshing me about this important topic. And I do hope that all of you have received something. I know there are men in the audience, and they too would have learned something. Ladies, it's so important. Let us do what we need to do to look after our own health. So I just want to thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you for attending. And Manveet, thank you once more. We hope to probably see you again another time. Thank you so much. Community services, sorry for taking up a little of your time, but you can come now, and I'll just allow you to come and take over and do your thing. Thank you so much. I just want to let's stand and pray and close this little section here. Is that okay with everyone? Thank you very much. Our gracious God and our Father, Lord, we thank you for this information that we've just received. You wish above all things that we prosper in health. And we just want to thank you for this opportunity that once again we can be refreshed and reminded of how important it is to look after our own health. May you help us not to just let this information come in one ear and go through the other, but help us to apply it to our lives. We thank you so much, Lord. And as the community services continue with their program, Lord, I ask that your Spirit will be with them all, watch over them, and may everything goes according to your divine will. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.